Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. You may or may not remember that some time ago I made a video on the 10 worst Arrow's Formula 1 drivers. So let's look at Arrow's best 10 drivers that competed for the team in Formula 1. As before, this does not include when the team was footwork between 1991 and 1996. What we are including are all the drivers between 1978 and 1990 and 1997 to 2002. So without further ado, the top 10 drivers for the Arrows Formula 1 team. Number 10, Heinz Frentzen. The German Grand Prix winner had a long career in Formula 1, starting with Sauber in 1994, before finding his first taste of success with Williams in 1997, with a win and finishing runner-up in the championship. He peaked with Jordan in 1999, scoring 2 wins and third in the championship. After leaving Jordan via a brief spell with Prost, Frentzen ended up with Arrows in their final year, 2002. He'd have been forgiven for turning up at every race in a dressing gown and popping his feet up on the dash. But he got his head down and gave Arrows something to smile about as they circled the drain. 2 6th place finishes at Spain and Monaco meant Arrows bowed out of Formula 1 with points on the board. Sauber made a brave decision to rehire Frentzen, considering his last 2 teams had collapsed out of existence, and he left Formula 1 after 2003. Number 9, Pedro Denis. Having survived torrid seasons with Forti in 1995 and Ligier in 1996, Arrows in 1997 was actually a step up for the Brazilian Pedro Denis. Results were hard to come by and races were difficult to finish. Nevertheless, Denis put in good performances, scored points at the Nürburgring and gained a reputation as a top-class driver. Everyone remembers Damon Hill getting a podium at Hungary, but Pedro Denis was in contention for 3rd at Spa before a messy pit stop relegated him to 5th. Arrows were eager to keep hold of Denis, but 1998 was difficult. He scored points at Belgium and Monaco, but retired with a lot of mechanical issues. Pedro Denis did manage to raise his reputation in the couple of years with Arrows and did a good job for the team. At least on the track, he deserves to be considered an Arrows hero. Off the track though, well, he signed with Sauber for 1999. Arrows ended up suing him for breach of contract, Denis won the case, and Tom Walkinshaw had to pay up £500,000 to Denis. If Arrows were around today, Pedro Denis would not be amongst their favourite drivers. Number 8, JeanDenis Mass. Joining Arrows towards the end of his career, the best from JeanDenis Mass had already come previously with McLaren, but he joined the Arrows team in their second year, 1979. He'd score points and get some decent results, even outscored teammate Ricardo Petrazi. He was a handy, experienced driver that helped to develop the car. He left Arrows at the end of 1980. He returned with March in 1982, but only briefly. In the years after, he built a very successful career in touring cars and sports car racing, winning Le Mans with Sauber in 1989. Number 7, Gerhard Berger. The Austrian legend who spent the majority of his career with McLaren, Ferrari and Benetton, Gerhard Berger made his start in Formula 1 with much smaller teams. He had an awful 4-race run with the German ATS team at the end of 1984, before signing on for a single season with Arrows in 1985. The Arrows A8 had a monstrously powerful BMW V12 engine in the back, but sadly the chassis was below par. The team of Berger and Thierry Butson both struggled to get the car into the points, along with many mechanical failures also hampering the team's progress. Gerhard Berger had several really good drives through the year, notably France where he was running in 6th place. As it turned out, he only scored points in the last 2 races. He moved on to Benetton in 1986 and retired in 1997 with the same team, taking wins for them, McLaren and Ferrari, and finishing 3rd in the championship twice. In fact, after leaving Arrows, Gerhard Berger never finished lower than 7th in the Formula 1 championship. Number 6, Damon Hill. From winning the championship with Williams to dropping down to the back of the grid with Arrows, Damon Hill did it all in Formula 1. He didn't have a great season with Arrows in 1997, but it was memorable for one race. the Hungarian Grand Prix. Damon Hill almost won this race in an Arrows, something Arrows never did. His Bridgestone tyres propelled him to third on the grid, and he overtook Michael Schumacher on his way to building a large lead until a hydraulic problem cost him late into the race. He managed to bring it home for second place. The rest of the year was bad. The Yamaha engine was slow, and Damon Hill only managed one other point finish at the British Grand Prix. He left Arrows for 2 years with Jordan before retiring from Formula 1. Damon Hill is one of only 3 drivers to finish second in an Arrows, and that heroic Hungary drive propels him to number 6 on this list. Number 5, Thierry Butson. Made his debut with Arrows halfway through the 1983 season, replacing Chico Serra, but Arrows were not very competitive. Nevertheless, Thierry Butson built a reputation for being a reliable driver who kept pace with more experienced teammate Marc Surer. Butson scored his first points for the team in 1984 and his best result, a second at Imola in 1985, inherited after Alain Prost was disqualified. He scored a few more points in 1985, but 1986 was a disaster for the team, and Butson scored no points, leaving Arrows at the end of the year. Butson would have a successful stint with Benetton and then Williams, taking 3 wins in Formula 1, before making the mistake of joining Ligier in the 90s. 2 poor years and half a year with Jordan later, and Butson left F1. He had a mediocre time in touring cars, but has found a lot of success in sports car racing over the years, and now runs his own team in a variety of different series. Number 4, Marc Surer. I talked about Marc Surer recently in my top 10 Swiss Formula 1 drivers video. He was number 3 on that list, and he also manages to be the 4th best driver in an Arrows Formula 1 car. Ignoring the temptation to just copy and paste what I said in that video, Marc Surer debuted in Formula 1 with Ensign in 1979 but joined Arrows in 1982. Much like teammate Thierry Butson, Marc Surer was a reliable driver who got a few points finishes for the team over his 47 races. He only got 6 points finishes for the team, but he did race during their worst period. He never finished higher than 5th in a race for Arrows, and he retired from motorsport in 1986 after a horrifying rally crash. But Marc Surer is good. Number 3, Eddie Cheever. The American-born Eddie Cheever Jr. was at one point considered the best driver outside of Formula 1, but he has an unfortunate CV in Formula 1. Debuting with Theodore Racing in Hesketh in 1978, he'd find himself at Arrows at the end of his career, but still pulled good results in his 3 years from 1987 to 1989. Eddie scored 8 points in his first season, including a point finish at Detroit. These 8 points were good enough for 10th in the championship. He'd scored less points in 1988, but did get a podium in the Italian Grand Prix. In his final year with Arrows and in Formula 1, he'd score 1 final podium finish in America and points in Hungary, before leaving to head back to America, where he'd win races in IndyCar, including the Indy 500, and he also won a race in the short-lived GP Masters series. Eddie Cheever also ran his own race team and took wins for them in IndyCar. His son now races in various GT categories, but never really got close to Formula 1. Number 2, Ricardo Petrazi. The original Arrows driver, Petrazi debuted in 1977 with Shadows, but joined Arrows for the team's debut at the 1978 Brazilian Grand Prix. Petrazi finished 10th and started a long and successful career in Formula 1, and at one time Ricardo Petrazi was even the most experienced driver to ever race in Formula 1. He spent his first 4 years in the series with the Arrows team. He bettered all his teammates except JeanDenis Mass in 1979, who scored 1 more point than Petrazi. Everyone else paled in comparison. He nearly won the South African Grand Prix, but retired with engine issues, before finishing second in Sweden. After being blamed for the crash at Monza that took Ronnie Peterson's life, unfairly in my opinion, Petrazi was banned from the American Grand Prix but scored points on his return in Canada. Petrazi only managed 1 points finish in 1979, but bounced back in 1980 with a second place at Long Beach. That would sum up Petrazi's time at Arrows. Good performances ruined by reliability issues. He got Arrows' only pole position at Long Beach in 1981, as well as a second place finish at Imola. He left Arrows and had a successful career racing for Brabham, Alfa Romeo, Benetton and Williams. And number 1, Derek Warwick. This may be contentious and it is a hard choice between Petrazi and Warwick, but I went with Derek Warwick because over his few years of Arrows in Formula 1, he was more consistent than any other Arrows driver. His first year with Arrows was 1987 and it wasn't anything special, about the results you expect with Arrows. Warwick scored 3 points and retired from a lot of races. 1988 would prove to be Arrows' best ever year in Formula 1. They would finish 5th in the Constructors and Derek Warwick scored 17 points. Good enough for 8th in the championship. Warwick scored 7 points in his final year, although he would later return with the Footwork team in 1993. Warwick throughout his Formula 1 career scored good consistent points and did just that for Arrows. He would later race in touring cars and would get results at a similar level. You can tell me I'm wrong, but in my opinion, Derek Warwick is the best Arrows Formula 1 driver. So that was the best 10 drivers to race for the Arrows Formula 1 team. A lot of great names got their starts with Arrows. I can't believe they have been gone for 20 years. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree or do you see things differently? Go back and watch the 10 worst Arrows Formula 1 drivers video, link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like and tell your friends. Thank you for watching and have a good one.